It's about time we revisited the topic of dyshydrotic hand eczema. In today's video, I'm going to be giving you a rundown of tips and tricks that will help you get this under control, clear it up, so you can get back to a regularly scheduled programming of your life. Dyshydrotic hand eczema is a chronic condition. There's no cure for it. It comes and goes. Understanding your triggers is key for managing symptoms, preventing flare-ups, and controlling situations that could lead to a flare-up. Now, dyshydrotic hand eczema often starts with these firm, deep-seated, hard little water blisters. Look like tapioca beads. On the sides of the fingers especially. They're super itchy. They usually last about 3 weeks. They rupture open and ooze this clear fluid. And once that happens, the itch seems to go berserk. Very, very, very uncomfortable. While the water blisters are a common feature, not everyone with hand eczema, with dyshydrotic hand eczema, experiences the water blisters. So if you've never had that before, but you still deal with flare-ups of an itchy hand rash, you might still have dyshydrotic hand eczema. After that weepy, oozy phase, then the skin becomes very dry and flaky. If you have a deeper skin tone, the skin can heal with dark discoloration. If you continue to scratch, because let's face it, it's really hard not to. If you've ever experienced this, you know it's like this itch that is calling from deep within your soul, and the scratch is the most pleasurable experience. But as you continue to scratch that hand eczema, it becomes dark, discolored, thickened, leathery in appearance. A lot of people who have dyshydrotic hand eczema will eventually go on to have problems with the fingernails of the affected hand. Most people, it's both hands, but a lot of times it might just be one hand. The nail folds become inflamed as it relates to the hand eczema flare-ups, and that can compromise nail plate growth. You can get these little pits on the nail, and you can get ridges. This video is about hand eczema, but this condition can also happen on the feet. Like I said, understanding your triggers are key. For a lot of people, the trigger is exposure to or contact with metals, especially nickel or cobalt. And these metals are in a lot of things. Jewelry, cell phones, things that you touch and handle for your occupation at work. But also, nickel is abundant in foods. And some people are so exquisitely sensitive to nickel that they have to go on a low nickel diet to try and get some control over their symptoms. Hand eczema can also be triggered by contact with your personal care products. If you are sensitive or allergic to an ingredient in a product, like a certain preservative or a fragrance, that can aggravate the hand eczema. Probably one of the most common triggers though for dyshydrotic hand eczema is actually sweat, and oftentimes this comes along with warmer temperatures. For a lot of people, their dyshydrotic hand eczema has to do with their occupation. For example, people who work in healthcare and frequently have to wash their hands a lot as part of their job and wear gloves, they're frequently exposed to that re-wetting from hand washing. Water on the skin plus cleanser residue can end up being very disruptive to the integrity of your skin barrier. Then you put on gloves. The moisture trapped up under the glove can generate a lot of friction, and that can aggravate your dyshydrotic hand eczema. Another group that is especially at risk are hairdressers. They have their hands in a lot of stuff that can be harmful and irritating to the skin barrier. Mechanics, cement workers, people who work with metals, again, common trigger. So it might be related to your occupation. For a lot of people, smoking is a trigger. Now, I mentioned contact with personal care products like your skincare, your beauty products, what have you, but one category in particular, which kind of relates back to what I was talking about with hairdressers being an at-risk group, is actually shampoo. Shampoo can be a trigger because we pour it into our hand and we use it to lather to our scalp. So for a lot of people who deal with dyshydrotic hand eczema, they might benefit from having someone else shampoo their hair, at least while they're in the midst of a flare-up, but not everyone can do that. One tip I suggest is to get yourself one of those shampoo brushes, put the shampoo on the brush and use the brush to shampoo your hair. That way you don't have to pour the shampoo into your hand. And it's a small little adjustment. It can really help you out in the long run. Just cuts down on that exposure to the surfactants in the shampoo, which can aggravate hand eczema for some people. Then I want to talk about one other trigger that you may not be aware of, and that is actually having foot fungus, a fungal infection of your feet or your toenails. Some people, their immune system system is like very, very particular about having that fungus on the skin and it reacts in a certain way, that can actually lead to flare-ups of dyshydrosis. In these cases, treating the fungal infection is key to getting rid of the dyshydrotic hand eczema. Not only have I treated patients with hand eczema, but I also deal with that myself. I have dyshydrotic hand eczema and it's really a nuisance. One of the main things you need to do, and you may need the help of your dermatologist to do this, is to figure out what your trigger or triggers, plural, is or are. Is it a metal? Is it a particular allergen? Is it something you're coming in contact with at work? Is it sweat? For me, it is definitely sweat, and I think to a certain extent, nickel in jewelry can also be a trigger for me. And if you think about it, like I said, sweat is another trigger. You have the sweat plus the nickel together under occlusion, under the watch band. It really does create an environment that will set off a flare of hand eczema. So avoiding your triggers is key, and that might involve wearing gloves in your occupation to protect the skin of your hands from exposure to irritants, to things that set you off. It may include completely eliminating metal jewelry. If you don't know what is going on, try eliminating metal jewelry. If you like to lift weights, consider wearing gloves to protect your hands from the metal of the weights. If you work in an occupation that requires you to frequently wash your hands, every time you wash your hands, make sure you rinse the cleanser residue off thoroughly and you completely dry the hands. This isn't one of the reasons actually why frequent hand washing can set off a flare of dyshydrotic hand eczema, is that there's water residue trapped on the skin that ends up being irritating and enhancing penetration of irritants. Plus, people will then go on to put on gloves as part of their occupation, like in healthcare. You've got water trapped up under a glove. It can really be a recipe for kicking off a flare. So make sure you dry your hands completely. I always suggest taking off your rings whenever you're going to wash your hands, because water and cleanser residue will get trapped up under the ring and serve as a nidus for flaring up your hand eczema. So after you completely dry your hands, especially the spaces in between your fingers, apply a moisturizer. Now, I'm a big fan of petroleum jelly. This can be a game changer for preventing irritants from getting into the skin and from reducing water loss, but admittedly it's very greasy. You might instead elect to use like a dimethicone based skin protectant. That is what is in the Neutrogena Norwegian formula hand cream. La Roche-Posay also makes a very similar hand cream. This type of formula does limit penetration of irritants in the skin, does help with retaining moisture in the skin, but is not as greasy. After all of the blisters have kind of closed up, healed up, the skin's no longer weepy or oozy, but now all of a sudden it's like dry and leathery, and it really does feel like brown paper stuck on your hand or something. At that point, I just keep with that little petroleum jelly stick, I just keep rubbing it on there, and it really does help, and it has helped cut down on flare-ups. Now let's talk about when you are in the midst of a flare-up. If you're someone who gets those little water blisters on the sides of the fingers, they look wet as they're breaking open, maybe it's triggered by sweat. This is actually a scenario where, as much as I advise using petroleum jelly, I find in this particular setting, during this period of time when it's weepy, when it's oozy, the petroleum jelly is actually not very helpful, and as you're trying to put it on there, it seems as though the itch gets actually much worse, and I think it might actually just have something to do with the petroleum jelly trapping whatever that irritating fluid is that's coming out of the skin. So in that situation, you actually might want to consider pursuing sort of the reverse type approach, and rather than locking in hydration and moisturizing, you might want to try ingredients, products, pursuits that dry that up. One product that I often recommend to dry up things that's both drying and soothing is Dom Burrows. It's an aluminum acetate powder that you buy in these little packets. You reconstitute it in water. You can soak your hand in that. It's very soothing, and it helps kind of dry up that fluid while also soothing the skin. Alternatively, you can soak like some gauze in that and do a compress. After you're done soaking though, make sure you dry the hands thoroughly. Like I said though, sweat is a trigger for a lot of people. Things that work to reduce sweat can be tremendously helpful. So whether that's a medical therapy, like a medication known as oxybutynin, which works to reduce outflow of sweat. That can be helpful. Iontophoresis, a treatment where you put your hands in this basin and this current goes by and it sort of stuns the sweat gland and can reduce sweat output. I've talked about that in my videos on hyperhidrosis. That can really be helpful, but it's kind of labor intensive. The other thing, if you see a dermatologist, you might discuss with them Botox injections. And if the dyshydrotic hand eczema has gotten to a point where it is impacting your performance at work, your ability to do your job, your day-to-day quality of life, you might actually find that insurance in some cases even covers the Botox treatment. And I say Botox, but really I just mean neurotoxin, neuromodulator in general, can cut down on sweat. This is something that is recommended for patients who have flare-ups related to sweat, is to use an antiperspirant on the hands. Antiperspirants have aluminum salts, which help to reduce the outflow of sweat. So I use a product, this is not sponsored, I bought it myself, called Sweat Block. It's a hand lotion. It can be used on the hand, it also can be used on the feet. And you put it on, and let me tell you, it really can help quite a bit, especially when you are right at the beginning stages of those blisters, just starting to like ooze and weep. It really can help cut down on that sweaty fluid that seems to aggravate the itch. Another strategy that can be helpful to both calm down the itch, help limit penetration of irritants, and also can help prevent you from scratching, which intensifies the itch. Even though it feels really good, it intensifies the itch and thickens the skin, is to actually get hydrocolloid bandages or patches and put them on, especially put them on over the blisters. It really can help because the hydrocolloid kind of absorbs some of that fluid, like the larger ones. I've actually put those on the sides of my fingers, and it really can help. Now, you don't need to buy the pimple patch brands because that can be pretty expensive. They do sell hydrocolloid bandages that you can try using like on the sides of the fingers, and that really can help quite a bit. Again, limit penetration of irritants and allergens into the skin and help provide a barrier against your fingers. When the hand gets really itchy, especially when it's dry, get a lightweight glove and put it on the hand, quiets the itch down, and you can go about your life. Now, you may feel like you look a little weird, but you know the desperation, all right? You know the desperation. I suggest like a cotton glove that's breathable to help reduce the chances that you get overheated under there, you sweat, and then that sweat aggravates it, but that can really help. Speaking of cotton gloves, when you are not in the midst of the oozy weepy stage, one thing that can be very helpful for keeping your barrier happy and preventing flare-ups is to treat the hands at night with my favorite, petroleum jelly, but you could also use a dimethicone based skin protectant hand cream, put it on, and then cover it with gloves. That can really change the game for you as far as getting that leathery skin to go away and helping with the barrier to prevent flare-ups down the road. Now, in addition to the tips and tricks I've suggested in today's video, your dermatologist can be a tremendous asset in helping you to not only reduce flare-ups, but to get you some relief when you are in the midst of a flare-up. For example, intralesional steroid injections, as terrifying as that sounds, oh my gosh, can provide so much relief because it just silences that inflammatory infiltrate. Also, there are, of course, topical steroid ointments that could be prescribed for a flare-up to get it to silence, to go away, and for your skin to clear up. That can be very helpful. There are also a class of medications known as calcineurin inhibitors that can be applied to the skin, very helpful as well. And then there are medications. There are a class of medications known as biologics, a medication known as dupilumab, which addresses a specific arm of the immune system that is abnormal, aberrant in eczema flare-ups. So that's another possible medication therapy that can really get you some relief. The other thing that can be very useful for treating hand eczemas is something called PUVA. PUVA utilizes UVA, which, yes, I know, I'm always cautioning against UVA from the sun. It's aging and raging and everything. One of the reasons why it's so bad is that it suppresses the immune system. But remember, it's not the poison, it's the dose. You get a dangerous dose from the sun, but we can actually harness that UVA and use it in specific doses that we monitor and measure to suppress the immune response to our favor to help clear up diseases. It's called PUVA because you're actually treated with something called psoralen first, which makes the skin more responsive to that UVA therapy and definitely clear it up. Another tip for you guys when you're in the midst of the flare-up and all you want to do is scratch is to get yourself some ice, wrap it up in a washcloth, and put it on there, that cold compress. It can help distract that itch. It feels really good, it's soothing, it helps to alleviate the itch. It's hard not to scratch, but thought, you really do want to try and do things to silence the itch so that you don't scratch, because scratching traumatizes the barrier further. So it basically opens up the floodgates for that hand eczema to be a lot more stubborn, to persist longer. And also, you carry bacteria on your nails and things that can be introduced into the eczema and cause secondary skin infection known as impetigo, which you don't want to deal with, that's for sure. All right, guys, I really hope this video was helpful. Let me know in the comments if you're someone who deals with dyshydrotic hand eczema. If so, I really hope this video gave you some tips and tricks to help get things under control. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and as always, don't forget, sunscreen and subscribe. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye.